Happy Sunday, or maybe not a happy Sunday with how this basketball season has progressed. Welcome into your Hog Hoops Report with Kevin McPherson. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Evan Kamko. Kevin, we'll jump right into it. And despite a midweek win at Missouri, maybe there's building some confidence. Maybe a new leaf is turning. The Hogs crash right back into reality following a 95-74 loss down in Baton Rouge yesterday to the Tigers. I guess at this point we can point to so many different things, whether that's point guard deficiencies, big man's inability to play defense very well against Will Baker at 25. What to you, I guess, signals, kind of the biggest red flag and biggest alarm in yesterday's loss?
Well, it's the overall problem, and that's a historically bad season in Razorback basketball. Historically bad. The 21-point defeat, I believe, matches the worst ever loss to LSU there. We know that the loss at Ole Miss by 26 points was the worst loss to an Ole Miss team for Arkansas in over a half century. We know the loss to open up SEC play at home by 32 points to Auburn was the worst ever defeat, losing margin for Arkansas in its home arena in 30 years. So this is a historically bad. I mean, Arkansas is 2-7 in league play. You mentioned the win over Mizzou midweek, so there was a positive there, but that's the worst team. I mean, Vanderbilt and Mizzou were winless coming into Saturday in the league play. So now you're battling for 12th place in a 14-team league when you came in
Yeah.
with top 15 national rankings and projections to be in the top 3 in the league. So this is historically bad at Arkansas. You have to go back 15 years to John Pelfrey's 08-09 team. Evan, when you look at how bad it can get, 2-14, that team finished. Like this team started 1-6. Arkansas again did pick up the second win over Mizzou. So if Arkansas wins again, it'll be better, have more wins than that team 15 years ago. But in February, we're usually talking about Arkansas steamrolling toward March, really getting things going. And right now we're talking about, can it not be the worst ever Arkansas team in SEC play going back to 91-92 when Arkansas joined the league? That is a huge shift in conversation for February. And so the red flag is the program is in trouble based on it. I'm not saying it's unhealthy moving forward necessarily, but for this season, relative to the expectations, and then you cobble it together with last year's 8-10 finish in league play and a 10th place finish. We overlook that because Arkansas advanced to the Sweet 16. This team doesn't have a viable path to postseason, and now you do start to look at some of these things and wonder, after a couple of back-to-back Elite Eight seasons where Arkansas rallied to finish second place in the league, and then the second Elite Eight team got in the top 4. Both of those meant double buys in the SEC tournament. So you had strong league runs in addition to the NCAA tournament. Is this starting to matriculate downward? It certainly has this season. So I think it starts from the top to bottom. It's why I went grandiose on this explanation, because this isn't just one bad game. Arkansas's, again, 7 league losses, 6 of those by double-digit deficit losing margins. The average margin of loss for Arkansas in the total of 7 is 18.6 points per game. So this isn't a 2-7 team that just as easily could be 4-3 or 5-2 or even 3-4 based on a couple of breaks going their way. They're getting soundly beaten in these losses. I mean, they're getting the brakes beat off of them. So it's not one thing from this game I wanted to talk about. It's the overall picture and the arc of this thing. It is ugly right now for Arkansas Razorback basketball. Granted, they did pick up a win against Mizzou midweek. We don't want to just leave that out and pretend like it didn't happen, but that's a colossally bad Mizzou team. And it was one of those deals where Arkansas builds a big lead. We've seen in a handful of games where Arkansas has been competitive and good. They can't sustain it. And Arkansas was kind of holding on at the end there. We've seen that play out too. This is just not a good Arkansas team, top to bottom, inside or out, defense or offense. It's pretty much all bad right now, Evan. I hate to be negative Nancy, but that's the truth.
Yeah, and it's tough to really say positive things. And again, we go back to maybe they're turning a leaf. You look at the preseason expectations, a preseason win over Purdue. You beat Duke early in the season, all this recruiting hype. I mean, many analysts had this Arkansas team as their dark horse Final Four team. And now to look where we are as February just began, and it's another deflating loss to one of those bottom half SEC teams. And it's interesting because the only SEC game that you've talked about that was maybe, singles digits was that loss to Kentucky. And Kentucky last night got almost pretty much run off the floor by Tennessee because of the physicality deficit, because of the issues there. And now when you kind of look forward to this team, Courtney and I were looking up net rankings and all that earlier. Arkansas is 130 in the net. That's nowhere near that 64 to 68, 75 threshold you need to be for the NCAA tournament. Quite frankly, it might not be good enough for the NIT, and that might not be what some people want to hear who listen to the Hog Hoop Report week in and week out, but it's the reality of where Arkansas basketball and Eric Musselman are right now. Not to mention all of the off-court issues and all of the social media, how do I say this correctly? Bubble that's gone on essentially, and all of the clout in a sense with this team.
Well, you're not only looking at a bad team, but you're looking at players. With one player that's separated from the program for a second consecutive season, you got another player who's similar to Nick Smith Jr. last year with draft projections and dealing with a knee issue. You're not sure, does he come back? Does he not? It's just it's a colossal mess up there when you really look at this season in a vacuum. But again, if you take it outside of just this season, Arkansas trending not in the right direction last year, dealing with injuries for certain, and a younger team last year. But at some point, when these things start to stack up, you start to take a deeper look at it. And you just wonder. You mentioned some of the rumors. I've been talking about it in the past week. One of the things that got out there was Eric Musselman and potentially looking elsewhere. And I've had solid source information on this going back weeks and months that is the case. Now, whether or not it's to be used as leverage to position himself with staying at Arkansas or genuine interest in maybe perhaps moving on, I slightly lean toward whether there's maybe a combination of both, that he is looking at other opportunities. Now, that, you throw that into the mix with everything else, and it might help explain some things. It might not. And I'm certainly not trying to telegraph that I know that he won't be here next year, but Musselman's been a coach that's never stayed anywhere for very long, a handful of years at Arkansas, 4 years at Nevada. And if you look prior to that, and, such is the life when you're a professional coach, especially, they move around a lot. So in the college ranks, it's a small sample size, but big enough, and based on the source information I've gotten, to believe that he has, looking at other potential landing spots. But again, we're not there yet. We're still weeks away from the end of the season, when the coaching carousel really starts to crank up. The transfer portal stuff will really start to crank up. But the reason I bring it up now, Evan, is even though that's true of the timing, the wheels start turning in motion now. It's really, but for all of that, behind the third party feelers, all these different things really start to intensify now moving forward. And so if it gets momentum to a point where we see changes, it's usually about this time of year where those things start really cranking and churning behind the scenes before the rest of us find out in real time what's going to happen. And so I don't want to create more drama than is necessary. But I do think it's a valid point to bring up, because this is again a historically bad season within Arkansas Razorback men's basketball. But there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that's going on, and so we should not just ignore those and then just wait for the season to end to start making reveals.
Absolutely. And again, it's not abnormal necessarily in college basketball. We've seen in recent years, blue blood teams like Kansas, UNC, Duke missed the NCAA tournament. So this isn't all, yes, it's a very bad season. It's not how fans would have liked it to turn out. It's not how I bet the team thought it was going to turn out, or really anybody thought it was going to turn out. But these are the things that happen when you have the transfer portal and you're trying to get guys from other programs to buy in maybe 6 to 8 weeks, instead of guys you can grow and develop for years or for a season and take from that high school level. So it's not abnormal where a team, swings and misses in a year. We saw that a couple of years ago with, like I said, Kansas, UNC, Duke. Other teams around the country have swung and missed and missed the NCAA tournament and have had down years to get back. But obviously not the season, anybody was expecting with the transfer portal, the guys who were in and are on this team, and how they thought the season would go. And that just happens some years.
Yeah, I mean, look, Eric Musselman has been an excellent coach at Arkansas in terms of getting his teams ready for March. There's one of the best in the business, and he very well could be back in place and in for a 6th season at Arkansas. And you'd have to put your money on him to not have another season like this. History has shown us he had success at Nevada. He's had success at Arkansas. This could be an outlier, but at the same time, it's not all or nothing, one answer or the other. There could be it's multiple choice here, and I think it's going to be determinative by, does he stay, and then what does he do to kind of correct course over some choices that were made this year, to kind of get things back to what is at the nature, the core of the nature of what he is as a coach, which it starts on defense. And this team has not been consistent on that end at all. And then once you got in league play, the offense was now in competition with the defense to be how low can we go, right? It's kind of both. So it's just kind of devolved that, once Arkansas got in league play. So that's a reality. So what does Eric Musselman do moving forward? Is he back at Arkansas? And if he is, and we don't know if he is, then there's, in my opinion, based on his track record as a college head coach, he gets this corrected and he gets back to what works for him. Because what's going on this year does not work in his system. At least it hasn't to this point. I think it'll shock most of us if Arkansas is able to do a 180 and run off a streak of wins like we've seen in these previous years. That started sooner than now, by the way. But if better late than never. If he's able to do it, then we'll be singing different tunes here in the next few weeks.
Kevin, I really hope we are, and it goes back to one of my favorite lines in all of sports and movies and sports. Do you believe in miracles? And there's always a chance that it happens. Any given Sunday, any given Saturday. But this one, it seems like it's going to take a miracle. We've talked about things that we don't know, like the status of Coach Muss and the team, up in the air. But one thing we do know is Arkansas is going to be back in Bud Walton next weekend against Georgia, and they do have a class of 2026 offered to Jaden Johnson, who will be visiting. What can you tell us on Johnson?
Trinity High School out of Louisville, Kentucky, 6'5" guard, 5-star national top 20 guy. I've been interviewed him a couple of times, talking to him kind of back and forth in our Twitter DMs, and just an outstanding young man from what I've been able to gather so far. But has interest in Arkansas. He likes the vibe he gets in his communications with Coach Muss. He mentioned Ronnie Brewer, who's an assistant coach at Arkansas, but also one of two recruiting coordinators, former Hog grade NBA guy. So you've got all those tie-ins to the league, which continues to attract top-level players because Arkansas's not only got coaches who have either played or coached. When you look at Eric Musselman, Keith Smart, I mentioned Ronnie Bird Jr., but you've also got with Brewer and Smart, guys that have played, guys that as players that have been through what these young men are going through trying to get to the next levels. So it always helps when your program has that. It attracts players. And then you look at what Arkansas has put in the NBA, and we start talking 6'5" range guards. That's really been the wheelhouse for Eric Musselman, getting guys of that, Isaiah Joes and Moses Moody, Mason Jones, all SEC player of the year, Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr. You start looking at Stanley and Moody. You just go down the list of guys that are playing in the league in that 6'5" to 6'7" range that can defend multiple positions in the backcourt. It's why you continue to attract those kind of players and bring them in for visits. So a 5-star in that 2026 class. It's a deep class. A lot of players here locally that are really good, 5-star level. But then you cast that wide net always, Evan, and you spread out just beyond your state, your footprint states even, if you're reaching into Kentucky to bring in a 5-star visitor.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be interesting to see what happens. And obviously, the next time, like we said, Arkansas is back on the court is going to be in a couple of days. Kevin, anything else before we go?
That's it. Like you said, no midweek game. It's a week between games. That's interesting. We'll see if a week off changes anything in terms of how they prepare, what he does with players starting rotation. It's just been a musical chairs thing. So with an extra few days off, I wonder if that change, if there's any kind of reset or reboot opportunity. I think it's a little late for that, but we'll see. That's why we pay attention to these things and cover it, Evan. Thank you.
Absolutely. Never too late for a reset. That's going to do it for your Hog Hoop Reports with Kevin McPherson. I'm Evan Camico. More Pig Trail Show coming up after the break.